Woman, a program by, for, and about women today, with Sandra Elkin.
Good evening, and welcome to Woman. My guests this week and next week are Betty Williams and Mairead Corrigan. They are founders of the People's Peace Movement in Belfast, Northern Ireland. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Normally when I sit here and say welcome to my guests, they haven't come nearly as far as you have. So double welcome.
Thank you very much.
The People's Peace Movement in Northern Ireland has a dream, a new dream for the Northern Irish people, hasn't it?
Yes, it is. We have indeed. We have a vision for Northern Ireland, and we would like to share it with the American people. We know that they have a great love and concern for Ireland, and we want them to help us to realise our dream. And our vision is that the people of Northern Ireland will come out from the violence that they've suffered for 7 years and say they want peace, and that our divided communities of Catholics and Protestants will come together and bury all the old hatreds and go forward together as one community, that they may see themselves not as Southern Irish and not as British, but as the Northern Irish people, a complete new identity. This is our dream, and we're working towards that, and we'd like to invite the American people to join with us.
Betty, did you want to comment on that or elaborate any more?
No, I really think what Mairead's saying, it is a dream, but it's a dream that's got to be worked at very, very hard. The peace in Northern Ireland that we are looking for will not fall out of heaven. Every one of us in Northern Ireland have got to work for this peace and work very hard for it.
Now, the violence has been going on for a long time, but your movement is a relatively new one. What happened to make you suddenly say, this is it, we've had it?
Well, I've seen an awful lot of acts of violence in Northern Ireland. I was unfortunate enough to be in the wrong place at the wrong time on quite frequent occasions. I've seen the Maguire children's death was just one of the few things I've seen. But about 2 years ago, 300 yards across the other side of the road, I saw a little boy. British Patrol was walking along, and the IRA opened up on them, and they blew the head completely off the back of a little boy of 2.5 on his tricycle. I've seen soldiers shot. I've seen the most atrocious acts of violence being committed by men in uniform. It's a vicious circle of violence we're in. One day in town, I was in town shopping for a dress or something, I can't remember what it was, and they opened up from the church, from the porch of a church, and they shot 4 soldiers. Well, I was born and brought up a Catholic in Northern Ireland, and I was taught to always say an act of contrition into a dying man's ear. I don't know whether you know what the act of contrition is or not, Paddy. It's just a simple Catholic prayer. So I knelt down and I said the act. I couldn't remember the words. His guts were on the street, you know, and I just couldn't remember the words. And I kept saying, God, you know what I mean, you know what I mean, please, you know. And I got beaten by the women, the Catholic women in Northern Ireland for my trouble, for just simply trying to open the gates of heaven to a dying man. It didn't matter whether I got a uniform on him or not to me. He was dying. I mean, there's so many people in Northern Ireland die for fruitless reasons, totally fruitless.
I know it was the same with me. I came home from a holiday actually to hear that my sister's 3 children had been killed, and the next day I went to the morgue with my brother-in-law, Jackie Maguire, and we seen his 2 little children lying. And Joanne was 8 years of age, and she was lying with her baby brother in her arms, 6 weeks, baby Andrew. And his little son John was only 2.5, and the baby's brain was dead, and they were waiting on the child to die. And his wife wasn't expected to live. And we came from there and we went up to the local priest's house to make arrangements, and my brother-in-law said, we'll leave it off to Friday till the baby dies, and then we'll have a triple funeral. And I don't think my wife's going to live. And the priest said to him, I have some reporters here, and he says, well, I want to speak to the press. And the press came in and he said, I condemn the IRA and I condemn all acts of violence, because the IRA were operating in an area where the children were running around in their hundreds, and they call the death of 3 children an accident of war. These are the people who say that they are the people's saviours. They're crucifying the people when they work like that. And for too long we have been afraid to speak out. I joined my brother in his condemnation. I then went down to the local television studio. I said, can I go on the television? I want to condemn the IRA. I want to condemn the UDA. I want to condemn all the violence that we have had to put up with for 7 years in Northern Ireland, because it's not the way we want to live. I was very angry. You see, unfortunately, when you live in a ghetto area where the gunman operates, you are surrounded by fear. I remember 2 years ago I was asked to go on a television programme. It was called Women's World Day of Prayer for Peace. And I felt very hypocritical going on to that, because I wanted them to stand up and condemn the violence and do something about it. But for the sake of my father and my young brother and my other brothers who have to live in the area and earn a living, do you know there are times in Andersonstown, in the Catholic ghetto areas, because a person merely collected peace signatures, their homes were destroyed by the saviours of the people? And you see, fear binds people terribly.
So your speaking out was really an unusual and important thing.
We begun by speaking out. Fear is contagious, but also courage is contagious. And we are now asking all the ordinary men, women and children of Northern Ireland to have courage and to come out and to stand up against the fear.
And that was the first time you'd spoken out?
It was the first time I'd spoken out, purely because my brother-in-law, Jackie Maguire, spoke out on the death of his children and left me free to do the same.
You did speak out, you know, you sort of, on several occasions when I saw acts of violence being perpetrated, I did something about it, something positive about it. But I was on my own doing it. I was so totally alone doing it, you know. I've seen the British Army in Northern Ireland commit atrocities because violence begets violence. If, for instance, if a British Army patrol is out and one of the guys gets shot and he's billeted with him, he's in the same platoon, he knows all his marriage, his everything about him, he knows his likes and his dislikes, and he goes out that evening on patrol with his mate by then, and the mate is shot, he starts to hate. You know, it's a vicious circle of violence. Now, the People's Protectors are the IRA, supposedly the IRA. Now, on the other side of it, we have the UDA and the UVF, who are the Protestant People Protectors. I mean, anybody who thinks that Northern Ireland can be reconciled with the South at the minute is nuts, because Northern Ireland has to be reconciled with Northern Ireland.
So part of your message is not reconciliation with the South, then?
It can't be. What are we going to do with all the Protestant people that live in Northern Ireland? Throw them into the REC? It can't be done. There are Protestants who live in Northern Ireland and Catholics who live in Northern Ireland. What we've got to do is reconciliate them before we can think of anything. We've got to let them think that it's a totally new way of it's a rehabilitation of the Northern Irish mind. For too long we've been two tribes. You know, Catholic tribes, Protestant tribe. And on this side you had the Catholic people and the ghetto laws, where the ghetto laws are totally different to God's laws. I mean, you break those 7 days a week, but you never break a ghetto law. I mean, for instance, if wee Paddy goes and blows a bar up and shoots someone, well, that's all right, he's a Catholic, he's one of ours. And the other side was, if Billy done it and he was a Protestant, well, that's all right, he's one of ours. It's tribal loyalties. This is not 7 years of vicious violence in Northern Ireland. This is 300 years of vicious violence. And if we sort of say now that the gunman, we've got to bury him, we're trying to tell him, put away the gun. Don't talk down the barrel of a gun to us. Come round the table. I mean, you're putting men over here on the moon and you're probing Mars. And in Northern Ireland, we can't get round the table without shooting each other, spitting at each other, and having nothing in common with each other, when actually we have so much in common, a common freedom.
I think this is very important, the fact that we are saying to the gunman in our society. You see, unfortunately, in a long time in Northern Irish society, and indeed in the world, we have glorified the man with the guns. Do you know we sit in our clubs and we sing about the brave men who took life? Now we're going to say in Northern Ireland we want a complete new change of society. The hero in Northern Ireland is going to be the guy who stands up against the man with the gun in his hand and said, you're not speaking for me, I haven't got a gun, I'm not prepared to take your life, but you're most certainly not speaking for me. The guy who gets involved with the man next door, with the old age pensioner, the guy who recognises the Protestant in the Shankill to be his brother, or the black man across the road to be his brother, the man who in society acknowledges his brother, the man next door, to be his brother. This is the kind of a whole new society that we want to create in Northern Ireland. Indeed, we want to say that we have led the world in guerrilla warfare for years. We are now going to lead the world in peace. And we say to the people of the world, watch us, because we are going to do it. And not only watch us, but imitate us, because the whole world has lived by violence and it doesn't pay. 1,600 people dead in Northern Ireland. My sister was lying in hospital after losing her 3 babies. And do you know her major concern? There was a bomb the previous week in a bar where a guy had gone out to have a drink, and he was lying across the ward from her, one of those open plan wards, and he had no legs. 17 years of age, he had no legs, and he kept squealing all day, please take my hands off, my hands hurt so much. That is only one awful incident of what's going on in Northern Ireland, with guns coming into Northern Ireland. That's got to stop. it's no answer. But to the gunmen we say, and we acknowledge that the gunmen in Northern Ireland have taken guns perhaps because of their political ideals, perhaps because they were never offered a way, but there's a new way, there's another way. And we say to them, put up your guns, and if you really care for the people, come into society. Let's talk about it. We're not telling them to get lost or go under the carpet because it'll fester in 30 years. But let's talk about it. Let's hear what you're saying.
So you're including the gunmen in your dream.
Well, I'm not sort of the 17-year-old who's on the streets of Belfast at the minute is a very confused little boy, because he was 10 when this violence started, and now he's got a very warped mind, and he sees men in uniform perpetrating acts of violence. And sometimes armies can be the best recruiters for the IRA. They can recruit boys to it. And also, we've got so many other problems in our society. We've got the most atrocious unemployment, which means that boy leaves school. He hasn't got a job to walk into, so he's lost his self-respect at 17 years of age. So maybe he thinks if he gets that gun and goes out and helps something that he's been taught and brought up to believe, that Britain's rotten and we want the South and all, that he's going to help and he's going to get a little bit of self-respect by this. But it's not him I blame. It's the godfather who put the gun in that little boy's hand. It's not that little boy I blame at all. It's the guy sitting somewhere safe, giving the orders. You know, we've had boys blow themselves up making bombs, 16, 17, and girls, 15, 16 and 17, blow themselves up making bombs. But the guys who say that to do all this, they never blow themselves up making bombs. They just give the orders.
What about your children? How are you going to protect them from all this?
Well, my children, we're trying desperately hard to let them lead as normal a life as possible. I have absolutely no protection, nor do I want any, because our peace movement is a peace movement of the people of Northern Ireland, the grassroots people, and it's also, Mairead and I have a really deep belief in God. Now, we're not saying everybody should have that belief that we have in God. I want to see atheists on the street for peace in Northern Ireland. I don't give a dang the fella next door has a totem pole, as long as he doesn't put it in my living room. I'm not that holier-than-thou attitude about anything. But I know what living in Northern Ireland has been. I have a little girl of 5, a beautiful little girl. God grant she has some sort of life in front of her. But we were in town and she was only 2, just going on to her 2nd birthday, and I'd taken her into town to buy her a pretty dress for her birthday party. And there were 13 bombs went off in the centre of Belfast in that one day. And I ran my daughter into walls. I brought my child home with 2 black eyes and a very bloody nose. And I was found standing in a shop doorway, totally in a state of shock, and my child in my arms screaming, because I didn't really know whether I was running into a bomb or running out of a bomb. You just didn't know where to run. It was boom, boom. Every 10 seconds they were just going up. And you know, we brushed people off the streets of Northern Ireland into plastic bags. In a civilised society, we should hang our heads in shame.
Has anything changed since you began your peace movement several weeks ago?
Well, according to the figures, we just got them before we left, and I don't know whether the killing is still going on and the bombers are still at work, but we have managed in 8 short weeks to drop the crime figures in half. Our average was 40 people a month. Now, let's face it, Sandra, we only have in the city of Belfast about 35,000 people, but in the whole of Northern Ireland, we only have 1,100,000 people, and we have had over 170,000 of those people out marching for peace. The world must see that Northern Ireland is not asking for peace anymore. She's screaming for it.
And I think perhaps the most important thing that has happened in this, Sandra, has been the fact that for very long we all were very, very frustrated. You know, you sat back in your home and you felt there's not a thing I can do. The politics aren't working. The politicians are still bickering. I can't join any of the movements, the IRA, the UDA. I'm not a violent person. Obviously they haven't any answer either. So what do I do? And the frustration was dreadful felt among the people of Northern Ireland. They didn't know how to go forward. And what we have now said to them is that you are important. We, at the beginning of our campaign, we went and we bought whistles. And
I heard about your whistles.
About the whistles. And the whistles were really symbolic of the power that is within every individual, and especially a woman, of being able to be heard and actually do something. And within the first couple of weeks, people got back their confidence. We had little women of 4 foot nothing on the Protestant Shankill holding back black taxis.
That's true.
200 women came out to stop the children burning buses. One lady sat in the bus and she said, if you want to burn this bus, you better burn me with it, son. The things that have happened in Northern Ireland, we could go on all night. We've given back the individual his sense of importance. But perhaps what's even more important, in our rallies with the people, we've had 200,000 people in Northern Ireland walking for peace, 250,000 of people in the south of Ireland coming out to say, let the North get on and do their own thing. Isn't that fantastic? All over the world, people have come out to support us. But what we are doing is asking people to not merely walk for peace and not merely pray for peace, but to dedicate themselves towards working for peace within their hearts, within their homes, within their community, within the country, within the world. I mean, our peace movement is not only applicable to Northern Ireland. You've got your problems. It can be applied equally here. But individuals have got to be given back their sense of importance and their sense of contribution, and know that they are pretty important people in their own right and they can do something.
So is that the difference between all the other attempts that have been made and this attempt, do you think?
Yes.
You see, for 7 long years in Northern Ireland, I myself have watched politicians get round tables on television, or the box as we call it. And you have the Protestant politician and the Catholic politician, and in the end the interviewee, like yourself, just despairs because they argue with each other. Their egos, they can't forget they have them. They don't argue about the people of, or how can we govern. They're trying to govern two separate tribes, but they're also keeping the tribes separated in their attitudes on television 7 days a week. And they get on that box and they bicker and they argue and they fight. Politicians do this. And the interview in the end says, okay, gentlemen, thank you very much, we're no further on. So this time in Northern Ireland, for the first time in history, the people are doing it themselves. The grassroots people, not the rich people, all the people. The people who haven't got a job, the people who are fortunate enough to have a job, the people who've got a nice house, and the people who have got a very nice house are all out.
Betty, I want to hear how you marched into Provo territory one day all by yourself and knocked on doors and said, do you want peace?
Thank God I'm still angry enough to do this, because I'd march anywhere in Northern Ireland. I don't give a darn what the fellas' beliefs are. Everybody has got a right to believe in exactly what they want to believe in, but there has no one in this whole wide world has any right to kill for it. So when I'd seen the children die, or the awful accident, and my daughter also witnessed this, she has screamed about it since, you know, unfortunately.
Your 5-year-old daughter?
My 5-year-old daughter. Unfortunately, she was in the car with me at the time. So I went home and I sat down. Did you ever get sick inside? So sick that you didn't even know what was wrong with you? I couldn't cook a dinner, I couldn't think straight, I couldn't even cry. And as the night went on, I got angrier and angrier and angrier. And my sister came up, she lives quite close to where I live, and I had a cousin in the house at the time. And I just said, and I don't mean to swear, I'm very sorry, I said, damn it, we've got to do something. And my husband was at sea and had, you know, an airmail writing pad. And I went up right into the heart of provisional IRA territory in Andersonstown. And I didn't knock that door very nicely, by the way. I didn't say, excuse me, would you like to sign this? We all want peace. I was spitting angry. And I banged the woman's door, and she came. I frightened the life out of her, I really did.
She probably thought it was another attack.
When she came out, I said, do you want peace? Yes.
She wouldn't have dared to say no.
Yes, what? I said, sign that. So it sort of started off like that, and it went down. As further down the street, every door you knocked, all the women felt that way. I just lifted the lid. They all poured out. I mean, I ended up rather like the Pied Piper of Hamelin, because I had 100 women in Provo territory collecting signatures for peace.
And how many signatures did you get?
We had 6,000 signatures in 3 hours. And I had women, we went back to my home, they were in the lounge, they were in the living room, they were in the kitchen, they were in the hall, they were lined up the stairs, they were in the bathroom, the 2 bedrooms. There just wasn't enough room to hold them all, and they were all just as angry as I was. We had let this go on so long.
But you can't do much with a piece of paper, so what did you do next?
So we decided then we'd call a Provi, what we thought was a Provi newspaper in Northern Ireland, which is a newspaper we've since found is a very fair newspaper. It's called the Irish News, and it comes out in Belfast. It's a daily newspaper. So I rang them up and I said, my name's Mrs. Williams. I was talking that fast. The man said, please, ma'am, could you slow down? And I said, I've just been walking around provisional territory in Andersonstown, and we have 6,000 signatures here for peace. And he was aghast. They had gone to print, actually and they stopped press to put this out the next morning, that Andersonstown, which was the people on the Shankill Road really couldn't believe this, because they thought that every time the extremists got up on television and said, I speak for the women of Andersonstown, that they actually did. when I knew them, I used to stand in the shops beside them, Sandra, maybe going for your meat or your groceries into the supermarket.
Did you ever, you never talked to them really?
Yeah,
though?
you did. You'd have said it, you know, under your breath that nobody could hear you. You'd have said, wasn't it awful what happened last night? And they would have said, yeah, but what can we do? You know, and this was this was everybody you spoke to.
So when you knocked on the
these
door...
people's protectors destroy our road. They built them a job centre in Andersonstown. What was the first thing they burnt down? The job centre.
You see, in another way, I think maybe a thing that might be harder to explain is what Betty touched on earlier, the tribal loyalty. You see, when you work in a Catholic district and live in a Catholic district, I mean, the men who are in the movement, as we call it at home, are guys from down the road or across the way, maybe your brother, maybe even your father. Because at one time, you know, the people who had really staunch political beliefs, they were entitled to those beliefs, but unfortunately no one ever listened to them. And also, only a few years ago, and it's not that long, our young men suffered tremendously at the hands of men in uniform. I personally suffered at the hands of men of uniform. Internment was brought in where our men were lifted and put into Long Kesh for no other reason than their name was on some old file for having at one stage belonged to a Republican family. You see, we feel all this because we belong to that society. There are people. As a member of a Catholic organisation, I spent all my Sundays in Long Kesh working with these men, going out to meet their families who had to try to make ends meet, to make a wage. And so we know these people to a great extent, and we have a certain amount of sympathy with them. But now we're at a stage where we have to be honest, and we have to say that what they're doing has no mandate for the people. It is violence, it is taking life. They are speaking for themselves, they're not speaking for us. And now we must say to them, we acknowledge you as part of our society, we acknowledge that there are faults in our society, but we reject the use of the bomb and the bullet, and we ask you to find another way, but not by violent means.
What's happening? There's an awful lot of money coming from this country to Ireland. What's happening to that money?
The American people in general are very generous-natured people, and I would say 95% of the people here are also very warm-hearted and big-hearted. Well, when they get the reports in the newspapers, or these Irish papers that are being printed, I read one yesterday, and I was amazed at the propaganda that can be carried in them. And I mean, the Irish communities probably here, third-generation Irish, who have never been to Northern Ireland, who don't know the heartbreak and sorrow that are on the streets there 7 days a week.
Well, look at the conversations that we three have had in the past day, and you've corrected so many misimpressions that I had.
Yeah.
So,
yes, perhaps it's been our fault, because we have set back as ordinary people, which is the fault everywhere, where the ordinary people set back and let a few extremists say, we are speaking and we are working for the people. We should have long ago stood up and said they're not speaking for us. I mean, people have been coming out from Ireland representing the people. The ordinary people, perhaps people like ourselves who never had the nerve, I mean, just to be here takes all the courage one has got. You know, we never had the nerve to come out and say, but we're now saying to the American people, you know, okay, we acknowledge your generosity and your concern for Ireland, but for goodness sake, the next time you put your hand in your pocket and pull out a buck, ask where it's going. Is it going to buy guns to take life? You know, this is what we're saying to them.
Okay, how are we going to know that, though?
I don't know. It's very hard to break down this third-generation Irish thing that's going on over here. I mean, there are pubs in New York City where it's a daily collection for Northern Aid. And I mean, I'm sure they're under the impression that they're trying to liberate Northern Ireland. I feel they must be, or they wouldn't continue to do this. Before I left Northern Ireland, the Provisional IRA brought a newspaper out. I don't know I can't remember the name of it. And it was issued around the Twinbrook area, where we have a lot of peace groups set up around there. And it stated a conversation that they were supposed to have tapped in on in the office, in the peace office, which was such a total pack of lies, it was unbelievable. It stated that I had said to a Protestant peace organiser in East Belfast, okay, we have the IRA on their knees, get the UVF in to kill them. And I mean, this is the kind of propaganda I wouldn't say to kill anybody. It's just, I'm a pacifist nature.
You're against all violence?
All violence. All forms of it. It'll never solve a thing.
And we are offering an alternative, and I don't think the American people are so dopey that they won't actually look at our alternative. We've brought out this little book. It's written by Kieran McKeown, actually, and it's the whole philosophy of the peace movement.
Let me hold it.
It's called The Price of Peace. because we really do see a new vision in Northern Ireland where the Catholics and Protestants are going to come together as a people, where they're going to see themselves as Northern Irish people. And you know, once that happens, we'll be back to the days of Ireland's saints and scholars. Wouldn't that be beautiful? We'll be an example to the world in leading the world in peace. This is our new idea, our new way forward. I say to the American people, watch us and we'll prove that this is what the Northern Irish people want. I mean, we've had thousands of people coming out to march for it, but what's even more exciting, in little street groups on the Shankill Protestant and on the Catholic Falls and all over, people are forming themselves into street groups. They're going over into the Protestant and the Catholic districts where they're exchanging cup of teas and they're exchanging views. This hasn't happened in 7 years. People asked us the other day, do you believe in miracles? We said we don't believe on them, we live on them. Miracles are happening in Northern Ireland and it's quite beautiful. You know, but it must be given time. These friendships that are now happening must be given time to mature and develop so that the people then can discuss how they want to go forward. So we've almost ground politics in Northern Ireland where people are doing their own thing and beginning to say how they want to be governed rather than from the top down, a few politicians saying this is how Northern Ireland should be governed, this is what the people should think. That's happened for too long. The Northern Irish people are going to do their own thing from now on.
We have politicians running around forests in Northern Ireland for 7 long years and they've never managed to hit one tree. It's true, you may laugh at that, Sandra. It's quite true.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot of forests in Northern Ireland and they've ran around them all and they've never touched one tree.
We've brilliant politicians in Northern Ireland, some terrible ones. Some of the best brains have been concentrating, indeed the worlds of the world have been trying to solve the Northern Irish problem, and they couldn't because they were stuck with 2 tribes, both of whom said not an inch. Now they're coming together and they're prepared to work.
We're out of time for this week. We'll all come back next week and continue this, but let's go out and hear a little bit of your theme song as we go out and just sit and listen. What is it titled, Betty?
Peace.
This program was produced by WNED-TV, which is solely responsible for its content. Major funding was provided by public television stations. Additional support was provided by unrestricted general program grants from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and the Ford Foundation.